Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Sir Hunt on X on this 8th of October of the calendar year 2025. As I come to you live from Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States of America. Lots to get to here tonight, uh, including an underground classic that nobody talks about, but I'm going to talk about it later tonight because everyone's so fixated on the Hall of Fame. I'm going to let the cowards dictate that particular topic because they reveal themselves as the biggest cowards walking God's green earth, especially brunch boxing, Matt, whatever that coward's name is. I just read your tweet a second ago. You're just a racist coward. Case closed. Now we'll get right down to it. Let's start with week 6 of the NFL season. And we talk about week 6 of the NFL season. Intriguing schedule because now we start to get to some of the nuts and bolts of playoff positioning a little bit, but probably better than what it was last week. Because last week felt like a snooze fest. Maybe the only real good game of the bunch was the Monday nighter between Kansas and Jacksonville. But the whole Sunday tilt felt like a snooze fest. Nothing really eye popping or stirring. I'm gonna make my picks for this particular week. Let's start with tomorrow night's game. Of course, Philly and the Giants. I'm not expecting anything from New York. Philly bounces back after the loss to Denver. I think they do it and do it convincingly. I think Saquon Barkley runs wild against his former team. And I think the Eagles snap out of whatever funk they've been in the first 5 games on offense, use this as their get-right game. They beat the Giants tomorrow night. Now to the London slate, and it is the Broncos and the Jets, the 9:30 a.m. game over there in London. And another one here, I expect the Broncos to continue the momentum. They seem to get things right the last 2 weeks against Cincinnati and Philadelphia. And I expect that to continue against a Jets team who's offered nothing so far, especially on the defensive side where they've just been absolutely torched. And the Broncos defense is going to shut down a Jets offense that's offered nothing. And I expect the Broncos to win this one rather convincingly, continue their momentum. They have a bit of an easy stretch before their big AFC West tilt coming up against Kansas City. And that's what we'll be looking forward to for that particular moment. But for now, the Broncos are going to keep rolling, and I expect them to handle the Jets. Now to the early slate games in the Sunday tilt. Seattle at Jacksonville. Seattle traveling cross-country to play the Jacksonville Jaguars. Of course, coming off the emotional win over Kansas City Monday night against the Seattle team that's traveling cross-country and lost a heartbreaker at home to Tampa Bay this past Sunday. What Sunday basically proved to me was you just can't trust Sam Darnold when you need to trust him. And that's what it comes down to. And what happened at the end of the day is going to carry over here because right now the Jacksonville Jaguars are feeling themselves a little bit. And even though it's a short turnaround for them, I expect them to handle business at home. I expect them to get the win here. It's going to be a close game. Neither guy's a trustworthy quarterback when you talk about Sam Darnold or Trevor Lawrence. But in this case at home, I think the Jacksonville defense is going to make life heck for Sam Darnold the way they did a points Monday night against Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City, especially the 99-yard pick 6 by Devin Lloyd, which changed everything in that game. Give me Jacksonville at home. I think that one will be a little pretty convincing. It is the LA Chargers and the Miami Dolphins. Omari and Hampton now on the IR. Now they lost both their top running backs, Najee Harris for the season, and Omari and Hampton on the IR. And of course, their O-line is absolutely banged up. But in this particular instance, they're playing a Miami team that's just fading into the sunset gradually and slowly, a slow, painful fade. And we talk about this particular thing. Give me the Chargers on the road. They get a bounce back win. I know they're missing the top 2 tackles, Joe Wout and Rashawn Slayton. But in this case, I don't think it's going to matter because Miami's offered nothing. And I expect it to continue. It's going to be a low-scoring affair. but the Chargers bounce back and they get a win on this one, especially after how they were embarrassed at home Sunday against the Commanders. It's LA and Baltimore. Likely no Lamar Jackson. A couple other guys practice, but I don't think that's going to matter. The Rams are just going to cook, and they're going to just demolish Baltimore. I think this one's going to be one-sided. And Baltimore's going to go into the bye 1-5, probably hit a reset button of sorts to get the season going afterwards. But LA's going to go to Baltimore and handle business. Too much Puka Nacua, too much Devontae Adams, too much Kyrie Williams and Matthew Stafford. I expect them to handle business. And that defense has been stout for most of the season. They're going to beat whoever's left on the Baltimore offense. And it's Arizona at the Colts. I don't know how you bounce back from a loss the way Arizona lost the last 3 games, and especially the comedy of errors at home against Tennessee. You had a 15-point lead against the worst team in the NFL. You blew it with comedy of errors. And facing an Indy team who's just cooking, and Lou Anarumo, the defensive coordinator, has that defense playing at an elite level right now. Bad recipe for the Cardinals. Colts win that one, and I think that one's not going to be close either. It's Dallas and Carolina. Same thing there. Dak Prescott's on a roll. I expect that to continue in Carolina. That offense, even though without CeeDee Lamb, still has George Pickens. That's more than good enough against a Carolina team that's essentially, aside of shutting out Atlanta, has offered really nothing so far this season. And I expect Dallas to go in there and handle business. That one I don't think will be close either. Give me Dallas on the road. And, of course, the smash mouth AFC North battle is Cleveland at Pittsburgh. We know how these two go at it. But Dylan Gabriel versus Mike Tomlin. We know how Mike Tomlin treats rookie quarterbacks. I don't expect anything different here. Low-scoring affair because you're talking about two defenses, but it's going to come down to Aaron Rodgers versus Dylan Gabriel. And we know how Mike Tomlin schemes against rookie quarterbacks. The record speaks for itself. Give me Pittsburgh at home. I think this one is going to be rather close, but I think Pittsburgh pulls this one out at home. They had the bye week. They got a couple bodies back, especially Alex Highsmith, who opposite T.J. Watt on the defensive front is going to help out. And that's where I think the difference lies. Give me Pittsburgh at home. So there's your early slate games. Now we go to the late slate games, the 4 o'clock games. The game of the week, San Francisco at Tampa Bay. San Francisco rolling with Mac Jones as their quarterback. I mean, the way he just picked apart the Rams defense for most of that game was something. Against a Tampa Bay team who's basically finding a way to get to 4-1, 4 wins on 4 game-winning drives. To tell you the clutch gene of Baker Mayfield. This one, I think this one's going to come down to the wire also. I think Tampa Bay is going to find a way to eke this one out. I think the combination of Baker Mayfield to Emeka Ibuka is clicking right now, probably as good as any quarterback to wide receiver duo in the NFL. And I think that one continues, and it continues to roll. Tampa Bay wins. This one I think will come down to the wire. Probably a game-winning drive again for Baker Mayfield, who's basically had a clutch gene so far, and he's in the MVP conversation and has ascended to a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. I want to fast forward to the Sunday night game before I go to the Bengals and the Packers. It's the Detroit Lions and the Kansas City Chiefs. This is going to go one of two ways. Either Detroit's going to go to Kansas City and just pound them because that offense is a machine, or the championship DNA of Kansas City is going to muck it up, find a way, and get the win. I don't think there's no middle ground with this one because we know what was written about. Kansas knows what was written about them Monday night after laying that egg in Jacksonville, especially that pick 6, which everybody wonders what Patrick Mahomes was thinking because nobody knows what he was thinking on that pick 6 of Devin Lloyd, excuse me. I think in this case, but a depleted Detroit secondary, I think this one is going to come down to Patrick Mahomes getting the job done at home. And this is the final game before Rashee Rice comes back. He's had a nice chemistry with Tyquan Thornton, and I think that one continues. And the Detroit secondary is basically a little banged up. Now, the question is going to be, can the Kansas City defense, which fell asleep in the last 2 drives against Jacksonville, wake up against this Detroit juggernaut? This one, I'm going to go on a coin flip with this one and give me Kansas City at home. It's basically going to come down to that defense making enough stops to slow down this juggernaut of offense that's the Detroit Lions. And Patrick Mahomes making enough plays on a Detroit secondary that's basically depleted right now. That's what I think is going to come down to. So that's the Sunday tilt. Actually, I'm going to go to the Cincinnati Green Bay in a minute when I talk about Joe Flacco. Now to the Monday night doubleheader. The first one, Buffalo and Atlanta. I'll tell you who one winner is, and that's this guy talking to you, because I have both Josh Allen and Bijan Robinson on my fantasy team. I'm going to be building up some points on this one. Expect Buffalo to come back after the embarrassing home loss to New England. The Atlanta offense is good, but not great. Josh Allen bounces back, and I think Buffalo is going to handle business down there in Atlanta. Give me Buffalo on the road. And it's Chicago and Washington. The rematch of the wild ending last season. Everybody remembers Tyreek Stevenson showing off to the crowd. Jaden Daniels threw the Hail Mary off Stevenson's helmet into the hands of Noah Brown for the game-winning touchdown. Washington found themselves in L.A. On Sunday. I expect this momentum to continue when these two meet in Washington, and I expect Washington to carry the momentum over and get the win. Give me Washington at home on this one and prove my point once again that Chicago should have taken Jaden Daniels over Caleb Williams. I've touched on that many times. I'll probably talk about it 50 more times before the season is over. So that's the rest of that slate. But back to Green Bay and Cincinnati. We know what the storyline is here. They announced Joe Flacco, the starter. And we have Bengals fans and Cincinnati media, once again, in a psychotic craze, the keyword being psychotic, that they think because Joe Flacco got the win as a Cleveland Brown over the Green Bay Packers, the same thing is going to happen. That's not why they play the games. You know, Joe Flacco had a quarterback rating of 55.6 in that win. He didn't look all that good. The only reason why they won was because Cleveland's defense shut down the Green Bay offense. And the Cleveland defense is so far ahead of the Cincinnati defense, they can't even see him out of a rearview mirror. And don't think for 1 second Jordan Love has in his head what happened on that day in when they lost to the Cleveland Browns. And he knows the storyline on this one. Also, big news, Christian Watson's coming back. Another target for Jordan Love. You have him and now Matthew Golden. And the running game is stout. The offensive line looks good. And that defense, after they laid an egg in Dallas 2 weeks ago and is coming off the bye, they're going to be ticked. They're going to shut down Cincinnati's offense. I think the Bengals make enough plays to make it competitive, but they're not beating the Green Bay Packers. Green Bay wins this one big. And a pissed off Green Bay team, after knowing they laid an egg in Dallas 2 weeks ago, they come back and they're going to hammer Cincinnati. No matter how hard anyone tries to sell this ideology, especially the psychotic nature of Bengals fans and Cincinnati media, that Green Bay is going to lose because Cleveland beat Green Bay week 3 or 4. I can't remember which week. Triangle theories don't work in the NFL. It doesn't matter how hard you try. That's just a moronic theory from the psychosis and the ignorant and cowardly nature of Bengals fans and Cincinnati media thinking they have a chance against Green Bay. They don't. They may make enough plays to put fantasy points for Jamar Chase. That's all they're going to get. Nothing more, nothing less. Green Bay wins that one going away. Every week they always find the ways to make themselves relevant when they aren't. I've already said my piece on them. I'll say the final piece about the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media once the season officially ends, because I'm just saving myself. Sometimes it's not the best when you talk about it. It's when you talk about it and how you talk about it. I did that once last year. I'll do it again once the season's officially over. Now to news in Dallas. And once again, we have a case of Jerry Jones putting himself in the middle of everything unnecessary for all the wrong reasons. This came after a hot camp saw him give your number one gesture to a Jets fan. And we're talking about the finger between the thumb and the ring fingers. I think you know what that one is. He was caught and he was fined $250,000, which is basically the equivalent of a quarter to a bubblegum machine for him. But he comes out and says the whole thing was inadvertent and basically tries to say it was no intent. So you had if you're saying there's no intent, in your eyes, Jerry Jones, you had no intent to fire Jimmy Johnson in 1994. Did you have no intent to trade Michael Parsons this offseason? If that's your definition of no intent, you just made an embarrassment out of yourself. And it's another case, and I'm friends with a lot of Cowboys fans, and I don't know how you guys put up with that guy. I mean, I lived through what took place in 1994 with the whole Jerry Jones, Jimmy Johnson saga, where the news waves all over the place was wondering, would Jerry Jones really fire Jimmy Johnson? And we know what happened in the end. We know what happened among many other things down the line. How after winning the Super Bowl '96, how he eventually fired Barry Switzer, and we know the story with that one. And it's a story after story after story. Of course, getting in the business of Bill Parcells when he wanted to bench Terrell Owens, sticking his nose in it not necessarily. And of course, the Michael Parsons fiasco that took place this offseason. The capper is what took place in New York. And we saw it on the hot cam. I mean, there's no unintentional or inadvertent on that part. Jerry Jones knew what he was doing, and he was caught. Granted, the $250,000 for him is like taking a quarter and putting in a bubblegum machine because that's nothing to him. But it's another case of the narcissism, the cowardice, the vanity that Jerry Jones has displayed since he took over the Dallas Cowboys, starting when he fired Tom Landry, and not being happy with Jimmy Johnson leading the Cowboys to the back-to-back Super Bowls in 92 and 93, to where he axed him early in 94 before the start of the 94 season. And we know the story with that one. And from that point forward, he's been nothing short of a laughing stock. And it is a case of what Troy Aikman has said countless times. The guy doesn't know how to get out of his own way. And that's what happened at the end of the day with Jerry Jones. And once again, he's caught in his own actions just simply because that's who Jerry Jones is at the end of the day. I can come up with all kinds of stories with Jerry Jones every single which way possible. We know Jerry Jones likes to make a fool out of himself. And I have friends with tons of Cowboys fans. The only thing I ask is, how the hell do you put up with this guy for the longest time? Especially the ones who lived to see him fire both Tom Landry and Jimmy Johnson. And we know the stories with that one. How do you manage to put up with this guy? How do you manage to back this guy? I mean, I think the Parsons trade was probably the final straw in his back, the straw on the camel's back cliche. I can't remember off the top of my head. That's right, the straw that broke the camel's back. But how could Cowboys fans put up with this guy showing his face every 5 minutes or every chance he gets? It's sheer narcissism at its finest. And people are still wondering how this guy got away with firing Jimmy Johnson and not getting backlash. Because, well, actually, he has got his backlash. I apologize. He's got his karma because he's been a laughingstock since that happened. Only one Super Bowl. Actually, since that last Super Bowl, in Super Bowl 30, when they beat Pittsburgh, Dallas hasn't even sniffed an NFC Championship appearance. Forget about a Super Bowl appearance. They haven't sniffed an NFC Championship appearance. What's the common denominator? The post Jerry Jones era after he fired Jimmy Johnson and Barry Switzer to boot. That's the story with that. And as a result, Jerry Jones is getting his karma. And we saw what he did against the Jets. I guess someone wanted to point at him, and Jerry Jones gave him the finger between the index and ring fingers. We know what that one is. And try to lie about it when the camera proved that was true. I mean, I don't know how Cowboys fans put up with this guy. I mean, I lived through it. I mean, it was unfair. Let me put this to everybody here. Dallas fans could probably explain this better than I can because they lived through it when they were hardcore fans of this. It was unfathomable and unthought of to fire someone in the middle of a dynasty or is creating a dynasty who went back to back at the highest level. And it was not even in anybody's radar, even thinking about firing him. Forget just thinking about it. Not even in the current stratosphere, you would have thought they would fire. Anybody would get fired like that. And when the news came around, because I lived it as a teenager, it was across the ESPN news waves virtually every day at least once. Will Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson, reconcile, or are they going to part ways? And we know why all this is happening. Because Jimmy Johnson got all the credit, rightfully so, because he was the architect of the dynasty. When you think about the Herschel Walker trade that took place, took place in spite of Jerry Jones. And from that point forward, Jerry Jones was basically butthurt. We know this. Why was he butthurt? Because he was jealous of the credit and the success that Jimmy Johnson put together and got the credit, and Jerry Jones felt like he was left out in the cold, and that's why he told Jimmy Johnson to get out. That's what happened. It was like the most unfathomable and unthought of thing back around the early 90s. In the middle of that Cowboys dynasty, which they could have won a couple more Super Bowls because Jimmy Johnson had them on a straight and narrow, focus on football, and that Dallas team was stacked. Let me probably argue the top five player at each position on offense. We talk about Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, and Michael Irvin. Alvin Harper, the perfect complement to him. Jay Novacek, an underrated tight end that doesn't get talked about enough. And they could have won a couple more Super Bowls and had the 90s their decade. But we know what happened in the end. Jerry Jones messed it up. And we know what he's done ever since he messed that up. The whole Michael Parsons fiasco. And the capper, once again, is what he did in New York to that fan with the finger, not in between the pinky and ring fingers. Excuse me, the index and ring fingers in front of everyone, caught on camera, lying about it. This is who Jerry Jones is at the end of the day. Actually, I think there's some documentary about it that he reveals his true colors even more. Dallas fans, I don't know how you guys put up with that guy. I really don't. I really don't. Because we have one here in Cincinnati and Mike Brown, and a lot of us don't put up with him. I think putting up with Jerry Jones is worse than putting up with Mike Brown. That says a whole lot. Sheesh. I swear, some of these men older than me, these actually grow up. And Jerry Jones is on that list. Now we're going to trace to a historical moment in NFL history. This took place 30 years ago today at Joe Robbie Stadium in Miami, Florida, where probably the premier talent in NFL quarterback history set a record that almost like was never going to be touched for the longest time, and it certainly wasn't for about a decade. This was the day in Miami where it was the Dolphins and the Patriots. It was the standout quarterback, Dan Marino, with a simple out route screen to Keith Byers to make completion set the all-time completion record. We talk about this particular day, and put himself among the upper plethora of all-time great quarterbacks. And it basically eclipsed to the number of 4,967 was his final tally. I've said this about Dan Marino on various tweets and various shows when we talk about NFL quarterbacks, because it's been a topic of debate forever. Yesterday, I talked about how Walter Payton embodied what an NFL running back was for his time. Dan Marino, you could say, embodied the perfect NFL quarterback for that time. And you could probably say because of how he played, he was ahead of his time. Because let me remind you, in the 84 season, when they went to the Super Bowl loss to San Francisco, he threw for 5,084 yards. He held that record for almost 3 decades. And how was that record broken? All kinds of rule changes on the defensive side and all kinds of way they tally stats, way different than to compare to what Dan Marino was. If Dan Marino was put on today with how he played the NFL quarterback position, and he was a different breed at that time, he get 5,084 by week 12. Because let me remind you, he didn't have a Jamar Chase. He didn't have a Michael Irvin. He didn't have a Justin Jefferson. He didn't have a Jerry Rice or a Calvin Johnson or Randy Moss or any of those guys. His top 2 receivers were Mark Clayton and Mark Duper. They're very, very good receivers. I'm not saying that they're bums of the month. They're very, very good receivers. He eventually had O.J. McDuffie. He had a tight end named Keith Jackson, who was very underrated at the time. But he had targets. But how he saw the field, how he visioned the field, how he surveyed the field and read a defense for that time was second to none. And that's why he amassed the career that he did. We talk about his career overall numbers. This is by the time he retired, because he had all the records at the time when he retired in the early 2000s. You talk about 61,000 yards, 420 touchdown passes, 4,900 completions, and 8,300 attempts. First ever to 5,000 yards. It was mentioned the 1984 season, 5,084. Nobody touched that record for 3 decades, and it took a boatload of NFL rule changes for someone to challenge it. That should tell you what Dan Marino was. Because Dan Marino threw for 5,084 yards at a time when you can allow a lot of things on the defensive side of the ball. And 5,084 for him was just effortless. That should tell you just how great Dan Marino was. I mean, he had most touchdown passes. Talk about the 5,084, 48 in a single season, the first of 400 career touchdowns, 47 game-winning drives. Of course, the keystone was what took place 31 years ago in New York with the fake spike. Everybody knows the story with that one. 30 at the time, 33 fourth quarter comebacks, second most in NFL history. Dan Marino was a surreally talented. It was a misfortune the guy never won a Super Bowl. You probably have the distinction of the greatest NFL player to never have won a Super Bowl, at least at the quarterback position. But you put Dan Marino in any era, we consider how he played and his style of quarterbacking coming out of the University of Pittsburgh, he would own anybody in any era. Because 5,084, when he did it, they didn't have to make the rules up or change the rules. Dan Marino just went out there and threw for 5,084 yards. It took 2 decades of rule changes, yapping by the football public, the NFL intelligentsia, among certain things to get him out of the game and legislate some of the rules so that record could be broken. Dan Marino did that before everything was outed. That should tell you how terrifically great Dan Marino was. And we talk about his career accomplishments. Remember, he represented the AFC in the 84 Super Bowl with his Miami Dolphins, lost to the Joe Montana San Francisco 49ers. And we NFL MVP in that 84 season. I mean, he set every freaking record imaginable. Of course, he was going to be the MVP. One of the 10 greatest quarterbacks in NFL history and the NFL 100th anniversary. That's a no-brainer. Where you put him, of course, I don't know what the criteria is. I just call him the greatest quarterback to never have won the Super Bowl because you put him in any era, he might have had one had he had the right team built around him. A lot of reasons for that. That's another topic for another day. 2005 Pro Football Hall of Fame in his first year of eligibility. That was a no-brainer. But when you talk about this outstanding, surreally talented quarterback and what he did during his heyday, especially the 84 season when he was man amongst boys, this guy could cut it in any era. Because you could probably say what he did in 1984 to put together all the stats that he did, he was ahead of his time. Because this is before we had guys like Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers, even a Patrick Mahomes, guys like that. Dan Marino was doing what those guys were doing in 84, and he didn't need the NFL to make 50 different rules changes so he can amass that record. That tells you how great Dan Marino was, especially the keystone moment when 31 years ago in New York with the fake spike as time was running down. He goes over, gives the motion, he's going to spike the ball. The Jets fall for it. Marino fakes it, throws it over the top to the receiver, over the defender, Eric Glenn, for the game-winning touchdown. And New York was basically stunned for the longest time. All the intangibles, all the boxes were checked when you talk about Dan Marino as a great NFL quarterback. And he bodied everything that you want in an NFL quarterback for that time. I mean, the smarts, the vision, the ability to see the field, that super fast release that got the ball out of his hands. I mean, faster than a blink of an eye. I mean, he had such a fast release. You think it got to him, whoop, the ball comes out and it goes right to whoever he wants to go to. Surveyed the field very well. I mean, knew his targets. He always talk about game managers. Really, every quarterback is a game manager. He was a terrific one. And even his performance against the 85 Bears on that Monday night showcase 40 years ago to break the unbeaten streak of the 85 Bears was probably his finest hour, and you could call that his Super Bowl. Dan Marino was as great as anyone, especially we talk about the 83 draft class. We had him, Jim Kelly, and John Elway. Of course, Elway's going to get the nod because he won the 2 Super Bowls. Kelly got the 4 Super Bowl appearances. But just in terms of overall talent and how to play the quarterback position, Dan Marino was the it guy. And if you were blessed to see this guy play quarterback in the NFL, you were treated to a delight because that's what Dan Marino was. Just surreally talented. Of course, doesn't have the career accolades as some of the others. A lot of factors get into it. Doesn't deter the fact this guy is a top 10 all-time great quarterback. Probably say pound for pound, a top 25 player overall in NFL history, position for position, you know, as far as quarterbacks goes, in my opinion, number one all time to have never won a Super Bowl. Would have loved to seen him win it because when he came around at a time when you could do almost anything on the defensive side, and I don't want to say get away with it because there were penalties called then. But compared to all the rules changes today and what we had back then, Dan Marino didn't need all the rules changes to get to 5,084 yards because you give him those rules changes back then, he gets 5,084 yards probably by midseason. That tells you how great Dan Marino was. And he didn't have, some of the all-time great wide receivers that we saw all time. You didn't have a Jerry Rice or a Michael Irvin or a Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Calvin Johnson, Randy Moss, Terrell Owens, Tyreek Hill, just to name several of them. I mean, he had Mark Duper and Mark Clayton, who were very formidable and they're very darn good receivers. Later on, he had O.J. McDuffie, a sturdy tight end, and Keith Jackson. And in the backfield, Keith Byers, who was a very formidable do-it-all back under unique circumstances. But we talk about who embodied the NFL quarterback position for his era. Dan Marino did. And you could probably call him the most talented in NFL history. And when he came out of Pittsburgh, highly touted. He was an it thing coming out of Pittsburgh. If the second he came out to the end of his career, set records and broke records and left with a distinguished, career, an all-time great career that few, if any, have surpassed. Kudos to the great Dan Marino. 30 years ago today at Joe Robbie Stadium against the New England Patriots, he got the all-time completions record on a simple screen pass to Keith Byers for a first down. And when you talk about that particular play, that what Dan Marino did well. He surveyed the field, saw nothing. So what does he do? Simple check down to Keith Byers and let Byers do the rest. That's how you quarterback in the NFL, and that's how Dan Marino quarterbacked. Put him in today's league with how everything is and how the rules are. He would own it, and he'd probably be far and away the most supreme quarterback in the NFL. That's how great Dan Marino was. The stories like that, we talk about great quarterbacks like that. If you've seen it in person, you love to tell everybody about it, and you just awe at what this guy was. And that's what Dan Marino was at the end of the day. Now to the historical world of boxing. We're going to go back 44 years today, and this one was the embodiment of the sweet science. It was a class and charm of Nicaraguan's finest, Alexis Arguello, against the class and charm of the blood and guts brawler, Ray Boom Boom Mancini out of Youngstown, Ohio. A free TV clash in Atlantic City. And these two guys, they embodied the sweet science for that time. They were two guys you just wanted to watch every time you heard about them fight. But these two shared a ring 44 years ago in Atlantic City. The story of this one was a case of styles make fights. Ray Mancini did all he could to hang in there with the surreal master sharpshooter in Alexis Arguello. But as the fight wore on, the skill level was just so much to where by the halfway through the 14th round, there was too much of a beating and the fight was stopped. But I bring this up where you talk about the embodiment of the sweet science. For that time, both these guys, more so Alexis Arguello, were the embodiment of what that was. That's just how they carry themselves, in the ring, but outside the ring, always gave the honest effort inside the ring. And when they left the ring that for good after they fight, you wanted to see them more. That's just what these two were all about. Gave a terrific clash. Mancini had his moments, especially early. Took a little bit of early control. But the greatness, the pure greatness of Alexis Arguello, his ability to basically be so economical. When he hit, he landed. And when he landed, he did damage. And that strategy of Alexis Arguello took over. And he saw it in Ray Mancini's face. The guy was basically beaten by somewhere in the 8th and 9th round. You can see it. The guy just took a beating as the fight was going on. And as that one was going on, Mancini just had no answers. And Ray Mancini was a terrific, terrific fighter. Alexis Arguello, pound for pound, might be a top 30 all-time great fighter. Not just, weight class. All time, top 30. He's certainly that conversation. Just, multiple division world champ. The way he conducted himself outside the ring, the beauty, the elegance, the pure style that he brought into the ring just tells you just how purely great Alexis Arguello was. Excuse me. Just how purely great Alexis Arguello was. Not a shot at Ray Mancini, because Ray Mancini was terrific. I mean, he got a lot of great, exciting nights, especially the give and take 1-round brawl with Arturo Frias, where he won the lightweight championship. But Alexis Arguello, he was a case of a fighter. Didn't matter how good you were. When you stepped into the ring with him, you were so far behind him, he couldn't see you out of a rearview mirror. And that's what this was for him. And Ray Mancini was terrific. Just wasn't in Alexis Arguello's league. The best moment of this came after the fight. Everybody knows the story with Ray Mancini's father, Henry, who was in a wheelchair after World War II. Alexis Arguello, showing the kind, charm, human being that he is, casually walks up to Ray Mancini and says, the greatest thing you ever had is your father. Like my father is a terrific gift to me. Your gift is your father, being Henry Mancini, who was at ringside, in a wheelchair after World War II. His last words to Ray Mancini, being Alexis Arguello's, if you ever need anything to help, let me know. I'm here for you. And Ray Mancini accepted it. Tells you that these two men, not just what they embodied in the sweet science in the ring, how they embodied as people outside of it, something we don't talk about in the fight game at all. And that's what these two did 44 years ago in a fight where it was competitive for as long as it lasted, but the sheer skill, the pure greatness and elegance and the beauty of Alexis Arguello showed as he methodically and systematically broke down Ray Mancini to retain the lightweight championship and a free TV fight, which was just a free TV bonanza. Just a terrific fight between two terrific fighters. And I conclude with something on the opposite end of the spectrum. This one was about the embodiment of the sweet science and the pure skill. This one was the embodiment of just two guys just saying, the hell with it, the heck with skill, we're just going to throw down. And this is an underground classic that, it was one of those fun fights to watch. If you had nothing to watch on television back in 1994 and you saw this, you put the remote controller away and you wanted to watch it. This was Boise, Idaho's Kenny Keene against Terre Haute, Indiana's own Terry Ray. No one's going to mistake these guys for being Evander Holyfield or Alexander Usyk as the next coming of great cruiserweights. But they gave us a doozy of a clash that took place 31 years ago in Boise, Idaho, where both guys were just letting it go. Kenny Keene, maybe sort of like a Gene Fullmer of his era, didn't get to the high level, maybe a smidge below. But that bang for your buck type fighter, especially in that part of town where they have homegrown talent, he knew how to sell Boise, Idaho, and whenever he fought there, those arenas were packed. And you bring in Terry Ray, another guy who was a guy who wasn't afraid to mix it up, had a couple world title shots before this fight. You knew you was going to get something out of this. One of the great underground classics when you talk about this particular fight, free TV on CBS. When you had the remote control and wanted something to watch and you saw that fight, you put the remote control away, because that's what Kenny Keene versus Terry Ray was. A terrific clash between two cruiserweights who just let it all hang out. I mean, no one's going to mistake these two guys for being the second coming of Evander Holyfield or Alexander Usyk, or even when James Toney won a cruiserweight title. No one's going to put them in those categories. But we talk about a cruiserweight fight, and we know there's short, odd history of cruiserweight fights. This was as good as any one of them. And these two guys in Boise, Idaho on free TV gave us, it turned out to be a majority decision win for Kenny Keene in a fight that really could have gone either way. I mean, Ray had Keene hurt at least twice in this fight, as I recall, especially in the 10th round. But Kenny Keene had one of the surreal chins in boxing at that time, especially in that weight class. Not necessarily the strongest, not necessarily one that did anything great. Skill level was vastly underrated when you talk about Kenny Keene. Not the strongest or the hardest puncher. But like those Midwestern fighters, sort of a hit and miss career. because he had some losses that had you scratching your head. But he did beat Terry Ray twice. He did hold wins over fighters like Rocky Gannon, who was a USA Tuesday Night Fight sensation for the longest time. Keene just outworked him to death. And beat a one-time title contender in Sal Montana. And Kenny Keene actually had a solid career, all things considered. Again, no one's going to put him in the upper plethora of all-time greats. But in that Midwestern circuit, and almost like Midwest, Northwest almost, because we were talking about Boise, Idaho here, he was a solid fighter and basically was the perfect made-for-TV fighter because you know what you was going to get out of him. One of the real credits to the sport at a time when, we were starting to evolve to premium networks while we had the premium networks like HBO and Showtime, while we still had networks like ESPN and USA Tuesday Night Fights televising fights, and still had free TV fights like NBC and CBS and ABC. Whenever those channels picked up Kenny Keene, they wanted to put him on, and he put on a show. And he was fun to watch. And on this day, 31 years ago, in front of a national audience on CBS and one of the real underground classics in boxing history, he and Terry Ray delivered the goods. And if you guys want to spend about half an hour just watching the two guys just throw down just for the sake of throwing it down, YouTube Kenny Keene versus Terry Ray. That's what this fight was. I mean, Kenny Keene was that lovable guy. How can you not like Kenny Keene? I mean, he was that lovable guy, with charisma, carried himself well outside of the ring, gave an honest effort inside of it. Granted, he was sort of overprotected, by the management team in his part of town because of his limitations and skills, but was a better fighter than you give him credit for. And when he was on television, you got the goods out of him. Just a fun fighter. And he showed it here when he beat Terry Ray by a majority decision in his own hometown of Boise, Idaho. And what was an epic 12-round underground classic. Just a great fight between two very, very, very solid cruiserweights who laid it all on the line on free TV. At a time when free TV was still the landmark for fights like that. Boy, we wish we could go to days we could talk about underground classics like this, because the stories like that in our sport that makes the sport what it is. Not all the stuff we see today, especially some bogus super fight that took place a few weeks ago in Las Vegas. Stories like this, because we these guys work hard the way these two guys did and put on a show the way they did and basically packed a house in Boise, Idaho. Those are the stories that you live to tell about. And Kenny Keene was as good as you could possibly be. Same with Terry Ray. Ray got a couple real world title shots himself down the line. He lost a split decision to Robert Daniels, albeit under weird circumstances, and lost to Fabrizioso, who was a solid light heavyweight and cruiserweight. But we talk about this underground classic, two fighters who basically said, we're going to throw down because we're on free TV and everybody's watching, did just that. I mean, underrated in terms of their skill. No one's going to put them in some of the upper echelon all-time greats, obviously, because they weren't, but brought more to the table than you thought. And when they collided in this underground classic on free TV, you got your money's worth. Kenny Keene and Terry Ray, thank you 31 years ago for a heck of a free TV fight, because that's what it was. Certainly the running for the fight of the year in 1994, because it was that kind of a fight. Kudos to both. Maybe I should find some more underground classics to talk about, because the stuff like that makes the sport fun to talk about, not some of the stuff we see today on the social media platforms. Give me a break. Talk about guys like this a little bit. I mean, yes, Kenny Keene was protected a little bit in his hometown of Boise, Idaho, but maybe that's all it meant to him, just pleasing his hometown crowd. Because sometimes if you're there just to please a hometown crowd and you're making success out of it the way Keene did in Idaho, that's your satisfaction and gratification. And at the end of the day, that's all it was for him. Very sound, very underrated in terms of skill. No one's going to mistake him for being the next coming of Evander Holyfield, but certainly brought a lot to the table and was certainly a fun fighter to watch. And if you want to spend just 5 minutes on YouTube Googling Kenny Keene fights, have at it, because he was fun. And just if you watch one of those fights, just put the device away, just watch the fight and enjoy it. I wish we could go back to talking about fights like that again, because that's when the game was really fun to talk about. And on that note, that'll wrap up this edition of Sir Hunt on X. I will be back tomorrow. Reminder, next Thursday, I will be live from Cincinnati to preview the Steelers and the Bengals tilt that's going to take place at Paycor Stadium. Myself and my show. So if you guys out there want to come out, have at it. I don't clamor for it. If you guys want to watch it, I'll send you all the link. And as always, if you missed part of this show or any others, you can catch them on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Spotify on your mobile devices and your laptops. Actually, if you guys want to look new Apple MacBook, I got the Apple MacBook M4 the other day, only measly $800. It's a thing of beauty. So I can catch anybody's show on that one. And as always, make self-care your number one priority in all walks of life. Always take care of yourself first. Focus on you, and all the good things will come your way. If you don't focus on you first, nothing else matters. Take care of you, focus on you, concentrate on you, and all the good things will come your way. Have a good rest of the night. Take care of yourselves. God bless, and I'll see you tomorrow night.